All right, it's Cisco Walker here. It's great to be with you. Struggling evangelist here in the International District. I have my good friend tonight, Brian Orndorff. Brian was on my first YouTube video, and it's been about a year ago, a little over a year. So it's good to have you back again.
Thank you.
And we've got some interesting content for you tonight. I want to read just a few verses to get us started with like a launch pad or a place to begin. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beasts, creeping things, and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And what we're going to be talking about here tonight is the subject matter of becoming Travis Bickle, right? How does a person turn into a, quote, anti-hero? How does a person get this negative view of society where he takes kind of the law into his own hands? And how does a person become like that? And if you're wondering who Travis Bickle is, it's from the Martin Scorsese film that was made in the 70s. Travis Bickle is I believe he's ex-military. Yeah. He drives a cab in the terrible parts of New York City, and he's got a vendetta for cleaning up the streets, or cleaning up the filth, cleaning up what he calls the scum. And Brian, you're from the Albuquerque area. The last video that we did, we talked about quote, the zombie apocalypse, and you've seen this city decay, and you've seen this city crumble and literally kind of erode with drug addiction, homelessness, crime, violence, homicide. You've seen these awful things happen to the city that you still love. But what are your thoughts on becoming Travis Bickle?
Well, I mean, now just to start off, he wasn't totally mentally there. We definitely know he was a loner, probably had anxiety, interaction, social anxiety, definitely, and everything. But just the steady decay of being in that and surrounded by it, and the hopelessness of nothing being done about it. Mm-hmm. You can sympathize with a person in general wanting to make a difference. However, his difference became more, like you said, vigilante style.
Yeah, and you're right. Travis Bickle, from everything that we could kind of gather together, he suffered from depression. He suffered from loneliness. Some would say that character was in an existential crisis. He was overworked. But you said something that interests me. He saw it every single day. So, there's a part of people that can kind of it's a darker part of a person's personality, right? Even if they're a Christian. Like, when you live in the International District, Brian lives outside of the heart of Albuquerque, and you moved there for kind of those reasons, didn't you?
That was the exact reason. I mean, people could say property tax or different scenery or a commute or anything like that. My wife and I moved because Albuquerque is not a safe place to live. That was the most important reason why we moved, why we made the shift. Mm-hmm. There's other benefits now that we live out there and everything. However, with my business, I own a small business. It brings me to Albuquerque every single day, and so it's not like I totally escaped.
Yeah. And well, you drive it every day. You're in the city every day, And so, you still come into contact with, you've seen the problem with the unhoused, with the drugs. You'll still drive up Central Avenue. You've seen the garbage everywhere. And so, like, what does that do to a person? Is it easy for somebody to become like Travis Bickle when they live in it every day, like they can't escape it? Like, can that happen to somebody where they can become a person who is going to, quote, I'm going to clean up the streets?
No, without a doubt. I'm not sitting here condoning it, but I am highly, highly amazed that there isn't some kind of vigilante group on the streets of Albuquerque currently, because nothing's getting done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And
Nothing.
Travis Bickle, he suffers from a negative view of society, right? He has a negative view of society, and there's reasons for that. And it's easy for people to get a negative view from society. Like right here, like right now, we're filming this. We're doing this YouTube video right in the beginning of the International District. You could go a block, you could go 2 blocks, 3 blocks. There's fentanyl. There's people that are suffering. There's people that are unhoused. There's people that are walking around screaming. There's prostitution. There's all these things. And I'm an evangelical, just as you are an evangelical. But I think it's without the help of the Holy Spirit, it's very easy day in and day out. Like, you can't escape it. There's nowhere to go to. There's nowhere to hide. And if you're not careful, even a Christian, even the best of us, we can take a negative view of society. And I've seen it happen to people. It's happened to me. It's happened to other people. Their hearts begin to harden, and they just quit trying. They just quit trying to understand. They quit trying to love. They quit trying to communicate. They quit trying to get involved and make a difference in their community because, like Travis Bickle, they just feel it's hopeless.
No,
So,
totally. I totally agree. I feel the necessary need for outreach as a Christian, but I will say ministry is not my forte.
sure,
Outreach isn't my forte. But at the same time, it just seeing it, like you said, it becomes more and more negative, more and more hard. And for me personally, I don't see a great deal of what I call true homeless, where I'm talking about down and out, mentally incapacitated. The families just can't handle them anymore. I see predominantly just junkies, thieves, and criminals. That's all I see in this city. I just traveled to Denver.
Yeah, what happened there? Because I remember you told me that their unhoused dynamic is much different than the Albuquerque dynamic.
From what I saw. Now, I didn't go into deep inner cities. I went more into the downtown area, and I'm sure that's cleaned up a little bit more. But most of the homeless people that I saw, by far, were mentally incapacitated. They weren't just panhandling. They were going about their business in their own little worlds. And, to me, I know it sounds strange, but it was like true homeless. The homeless that I remember when I was young, or the homeless that, were on Skid Row in LA, that's the kind of stuff I saw.
Okay.
And same with Phoenix. I went to Phoenix in January, and it was the same scenario. People that might not be able to get into shelters just because of their mental incapacitated, and they choose not to. They just choose to live out on the street in their own little worlds. But
yeah.
Albuquerque, I don't see that a lot. I give an uneducated statistic of 10% that I think are truly down and out.
Okay. So Travis Bickle says this. Let's see if we can deconstruct this statement a little bit and see how this applies to Albuquerque, how you've seen it change, how we've both seen it change. Travis Bickle says, he says, someday a real rain will come and wash all the scum off of the streets. And that's why I chose that passage in Genesis, because that passage is talking about, Noah building the ark, right? And we know that God's heart was grieved when he saw that the wickedness of men, that it was in their heart continually, and like it bothered him. And so that's one of those positions in the Old Testament that seems that seems a bit harsh to people, right? It's kind of hard to understand that, but there is hope, because he says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of God. So thank God that there is always hope. And you mentioned something interesting about a vigilante group. Because I've been wondering, and I pray and I hope that this would never happen, but I think, and I've talked to other people, I've talked to other pastors, other people in the International District, where like citizens, right? Tax-paying citizens, whatever, people are getting fed up with aggressive panhandling. They're getting fed up with people coming up to their cars, and like people are starting to kind of turn to violence and just taking matters into their own hands, right? Like the bus driver, that just happened. The bus driver driving the bus, the ART, one of the traditional routes, and this kid, he won't turn the music down. Apparently they had problems with him before, and so the bus driver stops the bus, gets out. They start fighting, and it was a pretty brutal fight, but like, are people getting fed up with what is taking place here? Because that's what happened to Travis Bickle, and that's what can happen to us. And sadly, that's what can happen to even people in the church, people that do these ministries. Like, it's getting harder to break through. So, like, what do you think of that statement with getting all the scum off of the streets?
Well, I mean, in a realistic sense, that's the job that as taxpayers give the local government, to have the police force out there. And now they've called in the National Guard, allegedly, to start cleaning up, especially the central corridor in Albuquerque. But I don't keep up with it. I don't watch local news a whole lot. I'm just not into it. But from what I've seen, I haven't seen anything.
Nobody's seen them.
Nothing happen. I've seen no National Guardsmen per se. I've seen no cleanups, no sweeps, no streets I look down and I'm like, oh, that street's a lot better. The crime rate seems the same. They had this big announcement about 3 months ago from, I think it was the Attorney General or Sam Bregman, and he was talking tough and putting on his cowboy hat and adjusting his buckle and talking about how tough they were going to get, and the chief of police and everything, and it's just a scam. It's an absolute scam, and I want people to know in other cities and other states, and hopefully in this city as well, that it's a scam. What's going on in New Mexico, as far as I'm concerned, politically is just an absolute mess, and this is almost ground zero for what could happen as a disease that spreads throughout America, of just the destruction of the inner city, of the youth, and crime and prevalence of narcotics, and just basic turning a blind eye. So getting back to your question about, the rain washing away all the scum, I think like in the movie, before he actually takes action, it's his fantasy. And it's sad, but I think that's a fantasy of an overwhelming amount of Albuquerque residents. Their fantasy is to watch rain just wash this all away. But Albuquerque is also a city of inaction. There's a lot of people with the mindset that we're still a real small city and a lot of things aren't accomplished and it's too tough, and we're simple, and we're not really simple anymore. We're too big to be simple, and action needs to be taken. And I do hope that people start revolting, not in a destructive way, but just start petitioning the local police, the local politicians, voting people out. If you don't like the way things are going, you have the power to change this.
Yeah. See, this is interesting. This is in my notes. I think that there are many native New Mexicans who fantasize about taking the city back in the same manner that Travis Bickle did.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, and Travis Bickle was motivated by anger. He was prone to violence. He was prone to frustration, vigilante justice. And so, like, I think there's a lot of people in New Mexico, like, they may not say it, right? They may not do it, right? They may not let anybody know about it, but deep down, they can identify with Bickle's frustration, his loneliness, his inability to escape and to get out of the situation, right? There's a lot of people, we were talking about this on the way over here, there's a lot of good people that live in the International District. And one of the stigmas, one of the things that can happen is, we can paint it with a broad brush and be like, everybody down there's on dope. Everybody down there's up to no good. No, there are people that live here in this particular area and they're stuck because of their income. They're stuck because of their lack of education. Like, they get tired of the garbage. They get tired of the dope. They get tired of people breaking into their houses. They get tired in the wintertime of people setting dumpsters on fires, right? But I think when we come to that place, we can get so... Because there's two things that can happen, right? There's the pendulum. The pendulum can swing this way, and the pendulum swings the other way. And what happens is the pendulum can swing to such a degree, where it's a toxic empathy, right? Like where we just want to love everybody to death. We don't want any laws. We don't want any rules. We don't want anything. But then with Bickle's character and with Bickle's ethos, the tendency is for the pendulum to swing the other way and say, you know what? The system isn't working. Society isn't working. The police aren't working. The politicians aren't working. So I'm going to take this thing in my hands and I'm going to fix it and I'm going to clean it up. And that is what we have to, I think, guard our hearts from happening, because I think it's very easy for people to get to that place. And I think there's a lot of people, and I think there's a lot of church people where like deep down, like I think they have those thoughts. Because one of the thing about church people and Christian people, and I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, but like we're really good about thinking like, oh, I don't have thoughts like that. I don't have thoughts like that. I just want to love everyone and I want everything to work out Well, yeah, but it's different like when you don't live down here and you don't, the other day I'm walking my dog around the neighborhood, right? And there's syringes with caps off of them. There's a dumpster and it's smoking because somebody like lit it on fire. There's human feces all over the place, and my dog it can't even walk on the gravel because there's syringes that don't have So it's very frustrating. It's very difficult, but yet it's something that like we have to address. And we talked about this over a year ago. So what changes have you seen since a year ago when we talked about these issues?
I've seen changes. I've seen it get worse.
Okay, that's terrible.
That's the change I've seen.
Yeah.
I've seen it spread into communities that I never, ever thought I would see.
Yeah.
Homelessness, tents.
Okay. So you're a respectable businessman, and you have a thriving business. It doesn't matter what it is, but you have. Tell us about the story where you were helping a client up in the Northeast Heights, and I was with you, and there was a homeless guy, like an unhoused guy, and I don't know his situation, I don't know his scenario, but I marveled. I was like, this problem is like up here now, and tell us about that.
Well, we were working on a job, and we were about ready to leave, and I was talking with the customer, and there was a young kid walking around dressed pretty normal and everything, and I saw him talking with my employees and talking with you, and I just thought maybe he was asking for a job or asking what kind of work we do and everything. And then as I approached, everyone had a concerned look, and what substance he was on, I don't know, but he was in a religious fervor.
Yeah.
He was talking to people that weren't there. Cisco didn't see it, but when we left, he had taken off his shirt and was marching around and just talking to people that weren't there. And it was in a, I wouldn't even say prominent, but a really nice area that you just don't see anything like that. And Cisco was blown away because he's like, what was this guy doing up here? And I'm like, They're everywhere.
Yeah, and I told that
Everywhere.
guy. I told that guy nicely and very respectfully. I told that guy. I said, hey, buddy. I said, you better get out of here. I said, you better go back down to the hood. I said, because somebody up here is going to call this in, and they're going to come, and they're going to take you. Yeah, they're not going to take you to jail, but
He wasn't even in the position to be responding to that. I mean, he was.
Yeah.
He was. I don't know where he thought he was, but I don't think he was on the planet.
yeah, but I marvel because like I'm used to that in certain areas of the city. I mean, really, like Bickle, you become kind of predisposed to it. You know, you're like, well, that just happens down here.
Yeah.
You know, we hear gunshots all the time. We see crazy things. We see, people with mental illness, drug addiction, terrible things. But like, that's when you see it every day. Like there's a hardness, there's a jadedness that can come upon a person like really, really easily. And as a Christian, I think you have to guard your heart against that. But I did marvel that it was so far up in like the Northeast Heights. I was like, wow, this is kind of changing. If people with mental illness, drug addiction, probably both, are up this far, then something is really the dynamics are really changing.
That could be a good thing because that's a lot of. Not that I want it to spread, but that's a lot of communities that have no clue what's going on down here.
Yeah.
I have family members that I tell them, if you want to really see what's going on, start about University of New Mexico area on Central. Any given time of day, you can go at noon, you can go at 5 p.m. I wouldn't recommend midnight, and just drive on Central Historic Route 66 and go all the way up to Eubank, and you don't need to see anymore. And a lot of people don't know what's going on in this city. They might watch the news, see the crime, and say, oh, it's kind of bad. No, what a tragedy. But they don't see the streets. They don't see.
Yeah, they're insulated.
People,
they're like incubated.
Yeah. People smoking fentanyl right at bus stops, foil, straws, glass, lighters.
Yeah.
And nothing gets done about it.
Well, but before we came here, we went to a little convenience store right here in my neighborhood. We got these Cokes and some other things. And there was a guy that was obviously drunk, like, right? He was standing there at the window, like Detroit, like a bulletproof glass. He's obviously drunk. What caliber do you think that weapon was?
It looked like a 45. Looked
Yeah,
like he had
just
a 45 extended clip.
sticking out like the Wild
Holster.
West. Already drunk, putting another 12-pack on the counter. And getting belligerent and talking about the difference between a hooker and a prostitute, and becoming agitated and angry, and like that's just a normal thing down here, but that is not normal,
No.
and that is dangerous. That's a Travis Bickle kind of person right there.
Yeah, true. And then meanwhile, behind me, another guy that's grabbing Milky Way bars, turning his back, turns around, magically the Milky Way's gone.
Yeah,
his pocket,
and they were more than likely unhoused.
Yeah. And this is what we're sandwiched in, just on a line at a convenience store. Just every single day.
And you have to watch out the window, look at the car, make sure look at the truck, make sure that things aren't coming out of the back of all to go and to get a soda pop.
Yep.
Yeah, and so like this is why I think people and this is why so many people, we have to be honest with ourselves as Christians and as just regular citizens, because there is more Travis Bickle in us than we want to admit, I think. And
in these circumstances.
In certain circumstances there is.
What the circumstance we're in this city.
Yeah, but we saw all of that within the scope of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that over and over and over and over again. And this is why we need the power of the Holy Spirit. We need God's love to be shed abroad in our heart again and again and again and again. Because in Christianity, Christians are, according to New Testament theology, and this is debatable to some degree, but according to New Testament theology, as disciples of Jesus Christ, we're not supposed to have enemies. That doesn't mean you love people to death, but you see things, and you want your relationship with God to be right, and you want your relationship with people to be right. So if your relationship with God is right, then your relationship with people will be right. And like, yeah, I think that to live in the 505 and commute back and forth in the 505, like, you have to be centered in Christ, because if you don't, you'll get bitter, you'll get angry, and you'll get jaded.
Oh yeah, you'll become part of the problem.
Yeah.
You know, I was just, when you were talking, I was thinking what the city could use is a take back our streets type mentality, as in community organization. How wonderful would it be if 1,000 people got some kind of permit, or didn't get a permit, I really don't care, and just all met up on Central and just marched up Central and just said, we're taking back the streets. And, you know, there would be a bunch more further action needed, but they have no problem having parades all the time for other causes, or blocking the traffic when, you know, Donald Trump has a different colored tie or something like that. But just as a community, get out there and just go up the streets and maybe show some of the people on the streets that either they care, or, you know what, if you're here to do no good, we're done.
Yeah.
I'm taking this, because I just don't see the city doing anything.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Well, you know, what's another interesting thing about Travis Bickle's character in the Martin Scorsese film Taxi Driver is that Travis was frustrated politically, even,
Yeah.
right? And he was disappointed with the attempts to, quote, you know, correct society, right? And so, like, politically, with just the local politics of Albuquerque, like, those are changing. Those are changing very quickly. You know what? There was a lot of people that I did a video on the National Guard coming, you know, and we were, and I had 3 or 4 other videos in the wings waiting for them to come. They never came. And for people that most of us didn't think that they were going to do a bit of, we didn't really know what they were going to do anyway, and the unhoused didn't want them here at all. I can tell you that right now. They didn't want them here at all. They felt, you know, because, you know, these are their streets, you know, so they don't want them, you know, messing around down here. But you know what? Every time that these politicians, that they make these promises and they don't come through with it, it lets people down in this community. And so, is it fair to say that these promises that are made over and over again that aren't kept, that are broken, does this add to people's anger and frustration with living down here?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, to hit on that point, first of all, yes, the National Guard, we haven't per se seen them, but it's not even the National Guard's job to come and regulate a city. That is absolutely ridiculous that you got to the point that you need the National Guard. You know, it's not like it's some major riot, or we just had a hurricane or a tornado and they're coming in to restore order.
Yeah.
It's just everyday life, because the police, their hands are tied. This is a direct reflection on the politics of this city that keep getting voted in. How would you like to be a politician sitting there saying, oh yeah, this city, and oh, we just built a new park and we dedicated this new thing, and oh, we got a film production coming in. Oh, hold on a second. I'm on the line with the National Guard because I got to call them in to try to get this city under wraps, just due to homelessness and crime. Not a national emergency or anything. And you're talking about the political side of things. There's nothing more than the blame on them.
Yeah.
If you have to call the National Guard in for anything other than some natural disaster, that is a direct reflection on the security you're providing for your city. And they're not. And I wish people would wake up and
APD,
say,
right? And APD's, you know, with the DWI scandal, all the problems.
Correct.
You know,
I don't blame them too directly. I mean,
no, but they're a whole lot different than they used to be when me and you were out there doing dirt. Like, you couldn't get away with any of the stuff that people are getting away with.
Not at all.
So that's so interesting. And I just want to reiterate that right before this video, you know, we're talking about Travis Bickle. We're talking about being frustrated. We're talking about, you know, people are people tempted to take the law in our own hand. We go into a store to buy a Coke, and we see people stealing. We see a drunk man with a gun buying more booze.
Yep.
Like right before we do the video. So like the city, and no, we're not Detroit, we're not New York, we're not California, but for people like me and you that have grown up here, things have gotten really out of control. And and if you're honest with yourself, sometimes you can identify with some of the things that Bickle says when he's like, I just wish somebody would come in and just do something about this.
Oh, definitely. And I mean,
how long do you think that's been going on? Like these, you said that, you have to be careful entertaining fantasies, right? Because Bickle had these fantasies about cleaning up the streets and psychologically, this, but if you entertain those fantasies hundreds and thousands of times maybe, and you don't catch yourself and try to control yourself, like these fantasies will play out and you will begin to act out these fantasies, just as Travis Bickle does. So like we have to watch these fantasies, but how long do you think people have been frustrated here in this city, waiting around for something to be done and it's not done?
To honestly, like time-wise, I'd say a decade.
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
I moved back here 2012, and in 2012, I brought my wife. She had never been here, didn't know anything about it. She trusted me. I said, I really enjoyed Albuquerque. Let's move out there. Let's start our life out there together. And I would say, circa 2014, 15 is when I started having a little bit of shame and embarrassment that I brought her out here. For a few years it was okay. Another example is when I was a young man and I wasn't doing good in California. I moved out here because my dad and grandmother lived out here. And I moved out here when I was 18, and I had other friends back home that weren't doing good as well. And I would always tell them, hey, if you want a fresh start, come to Albuquerque. It's got 4 seasons. There's a good mix of people. The city's relatively safe. It's clean. It's affordable. There's no traffic. There's not much crime. There's some gangs, not that bad. If you want trouble, you can find trouble. But if not, you can live a pretty safe life. And I tell people all the time, if I had somebody struggling in California or wherever, a friend, I would tell them the last place you want to come to try to change your life is Albuquerque. Stay away from Albuquerque.
Yeah.
And a little point you had too was, this ain't New York, this ain't Detroit, and everything. But I would also say if you take some of the numbers per capita, the city's approximately 600,000. Per capita, I would say we would eclipse numbers of New York and Detroit. Crime, homelessness, rape, petty theft. I think a lot of the numbers are doctored. I don't believe a lot of statistical numbers from this city, especially from, the governor's office and all that stuff. So, that's part of the problem of just cleaning this up. And it's ironic because in the movie Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle actually does become a hero. So usually, the anti-hero winds up tragically getting jailed or dies, and I believe in Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle becomes a known hero, and he has a newfound arrogance and pride in what he did.
Yeah.
Which is, could happen.
He saves Iris.
Correct.
Right. Okay, now let's talk about Iris for a minute. Let's talk about Iris because Iris is a 12. She's in her role in the film is she's a 12-year-old prostitute, teenage prostitute. The actress Jodie Foster. There was the Hinckley connection and all that stuff. We might get into that if we have time. I'm not sure. But Travis cannot fathom why Iris, a teenage prostitute, doesn't want help out of her desperate situation, right?
Yep.
So I see that playing out here in the city with the church and with these social programs, right? Social justice warriors, they want to help so much. They want to help people get off fentanyl. They want to help people get out of prostitution. They want to help people get out of poverty. But sometimes, and sadly to say, a majority of the time, what do you do with people who are like Iris and they don't want to leave and get out?
Well, unfortunately, I'm a little more stringent. You know, I'm a conservative. I'm not going to sit there and align myself with parties and stuff like that. I'm a conservative
Yeah.
Christian man. Wasn't always like that by any means, but I just kind of play by the rule that you can only help people that are looking to be helped. You know, if you
Yeah.
don't want help, it's very hard to crack into somebody to get help. So, you know, with Iris, he didn't understand because he wasn't part of that life. He wasn't a runaway. He, you know, I don't know what his family life was or anything like that. So he just didn't understand that. People outreach on the street, you know, they just think that people are like, well, you know, if I could just clean up my life and then get a job and turn it all around. And a lot of people, they just don't want that. There's a lot of factors for that. You know, sometimes assistance from the government makes it easy to stay into that lifestyle. Some people just choose that lifestyle because, hey, I don't have credit cards. I could pick up and leave and go wherever I want. You know, I'm just like a nomadic lifestyle life and everything like that. But, you know, I spend a lot of time in Narcotics Anonymous, and they definitely preached a lot of, you know, you can't help the unwilling. You can
Yes.
plant seeds.
Yeah.
I do believe that there were seeds planted in me and everything, but when it's time for someone to really want help, that's when they're susceptible for help. But until then, you know, I guess they got to keep hitting their head against the wall.
Yeah.
That's my belief.
Now, is the church, you know, we're talking about outreaches, planting seeds, things like that, you know, the church and certain outreaches, they have been criticized for loving the unhoused or the drug addicts to death. Is that a fair statement to say? Is that too harsh? Is it true and false at the same time? Do you think the church is loving the unhoused to death? You know, too much food, too much clothes, because you know this season's coming up here. You know, we live here in this area, but this season's coming up where it's going to be hot. And it's going to be hotter than hell out there on that asphalt and on that concrete. And these unhoused folks, whether you like them or hate them, one thing you can't deny is that they get smashed. They get crucified with the heat.
Yeah.
And so, like, we're doing everything that we can. Churches are coming together, pulling together, and they've done this. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I don't reinvent the wheel. I glob on to other ministries that are already working, that are well established here, because they have the trust of the people in the community, and they provide the consistency and the punctuality. So, you know, why reinvent the wheel? Just get on board with somebody who's helping. But a lot of people feel like the church is enabling people to stay in this kind of lifestyle. So, like, that's a tricky one to try to figure out, right?
Kinda. I mean, I can't go against what is commanded in the Bible.
Okay,
And
good.
so, you know,
okay.
that's one thing about it. Two, I think a lot of church outreach, you know, it, quote, comes at a price. If they're going to get a free meal, they're going to be preached to. They're going to hear the gospel. It's not like, here's a free meal, thanks for coming, bye.
Yeah.
You know, they're you know, whether they want it or not, they're going to hear some of the gospel. So it is a give and take. I don't think it's quite enabling. For me, I think the enabling is the EBT, the free stays, the homeless shelters, not just like overnight, but when people go in there and they get caught with drugs and they're told, you know what, you need to leave tonight, but come back tomorrow. It's okay, just don't bring any drugs tomorrow. There's no discipline when it comes to the government. To me, the government enables. I don't think the church enables.
Okay, good. Okay.
That's my belief. I'm sure if you're anti-Christian, then you'll sit there and look at it as, oh, all they do is enable and all they do is sweet talk these people and they're not really helping these people. But when you're given all this free stuff by the government, there is no like, and now that you've got this, you need to do this. We need to see 2 job applications from all that stuff's just being wiped away. And it's creating this entitled, enabled, hey, you know, I'm homeless. I want this right now. Give it to me. And this city's notorious for that.
Yeah, we see that. You know, I see that singing for for the pop-up ministries and the ministries that I help here. It's your job to feed us. It's your job to do that. I've seen people get angry that they get bologna sandwiches when they're used to like a styrofoam container, that's got chicken and rice or something in it. Like I've seen people get angry, and one thing I can say about Albuquerque is that the homeless are not starving to death. Mm-hmm. I do see, and I've seen this is going on the third year. This is why we're laboring so hard for the water, is because I've seen a lack of water out here in the summers. And the summers out here are just awful. You work outside in the heat all summer long, and in whatever reason that somebody is unhoused, if they're on drugs, but how bad it is for a person to be on the asphalt, on concrete, without any water. I mean, it is really, really awful. So we're hoping that, that the church can do a little better this year with that. The government and all the state funding and all the state money that is given away, that is provided for places, Gateway, all these, but like the state of New Mexico, the city, like you can't even come up with water, cooling stations, so I'm glad that you acknowledge that, and I agree with you. It's the government can pick up some slack too, as far as like getting people water this summer. Yeah. Because it's really, really bad.
Question for you. I don't know if it's either questions, but Travis Bickle's obviously a taxi driver.
Yes.
And so he talks briefly about, his work. He works. He's a taxpayer and everything. How much of that do you think played into him seeing the scum on the streets and his resentment that, these people are just, they're not paying taxes. They're not having, to go 9 to 5. They're not struggling to afford rent and everything. I mean,
yeah, and he lives in a dump. He right, his little apartment.
He lives in a bad place and doesn't have a spectacular life, but nobody's coming to bail him out or save him. That's something that plays into my life. I see these, like you said, people entitled and, I can't believe I got bologna and everything. And, I have some people back home in California that are on EBT, and they'll tell me, I worked a construction job and I made, $2,000, but yet they still qualify for EBT. And then here I am just, grinding, doing the same job for 30 years, providing, grateful for what I do and everything. But there is a piece of me that I'm like, how fair is this?
Yeah.
And I don't want to get on the, what about me? But there's this fairness that isn't being adequated, and that's part of what I wish the community would wake up to as well, is people, they're lawful, they pay their taxes, they do what they have to do day in and day out and work, and then you got these people that are not following the rules and they're not getting punished. And then it almost seems like they're the ones that are being favored and catered to. And I think that's what Travis Bickle really set him off too.
Yeah. Well, people, we see that, and we receive government assistance. We're very thankful. That we have food stamps because of what we make. We wouldn't be able to make it any other way. But I hear that quite a bit actually, and I think that adds to the frustration that people work hard and have to live in an apartment that has cockroaches, that they have to put up with noise, racket, garbage, filth, and I don't mean filth with people, but like just like we walk outside here all the time and there's just trash everywhere, because people are jumping into the garbage cans
and by no means was I directing anything towards you. I mean, you work. Your wife works. You guys do what you need to do. There, and I support requirements. I have no problem with food stamps and Section 8, and that's what it's there for when people need help. But it's not like, hey, I need help, and once I get this, I never have to do anything ever again. That's not what these programs are for. And I know you guys, you work as hard as you can, and you and I both we came from like nothing. And that's part of my frustration too, is, you know, I hear all the sob stories and the excuses and everything. And I told you recently, you know, as recent as 2009, I was living with my mom. I was on psych meds. I was smoking meth. I had no life. I had no existence. Mentally just broken. And 15 years later, you know, I'm married. I have a successful business. I bought a house. You know, I have material possessions. I work for my church. I have a solid church family. I have reestablishment with friends. I'm able to truly, you know, disciple other people through my life and everything. And so I have a firm belief that you make your life what you make it to be. Now, not everybody is going to be as fortunate as me. Why I was that fortunate, I guess just faith in the Lord. But the excuse that, oh, I can't get out of this lifestyle, and I don't buy that. I don't buy that unless you're really, really mentally incapacitated and you just can't do that. But that's the frustration I have the most, is I've been there and I've gotten out of it. So I do believe that most people can as well.
Yeah. Okay, closing thoughts.
Yep.
I'm going to read this statement. You give me your take on it. This is Travis Bickle talking to Palantine, who's running for the election of president, right? He says this city here is like an open sewer, you know. It's full of filth and scum. Sometimes I can hardly take it. Whatever becomes of the president should just really clean it up, you know what I mean? Sometimes I go out and I smell it. I get headaches. It's so bad, you know. It's like they just never go away, you know. It's like I think that the president should clean up this whole mess here. He should flush it down the effing toilet.
Once again,
obviously, we know that's not like the answer, but like,
well, it was his answer. You know, I do think that Bickle thought things were as easy as that. I really do think he thought that if you were president,
almost like the Noahic scripture I read, right?
Yeah.
Like just, you know,
wipe it all and start again.
Start it over again.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think Bickle was a little ignorant, a little naive, and he had that impression that as president you could just do everything and whatever you did it would just magically happen. Now that's a fantasy, but we do have representatives in government that aren't helpless. They can get stuff done. You know, our Mayor Keller here in town in Albuquerque, a lot of times he'll take press conferences and he'll throw somebody out to the forefront, and they'll make the excuses, or he'll just be like, oh, you know, this happened, but he's always got this attitude like he has no say in it, or like he has no ability to get things done. It's like, you are the mayor of this city. Most stuff goes through you, starts with you and ends with you. Yes, he has a lot of ability. So with Bickle, you know, that was the fantasy, that someone could come in and just do an edict and just be like, everybody has to get off the street, and if you don't, you're going to jail. That's the fantasy, and that's the fantasy that a lot of people had with Trump being in power right now. You know,
and people still have that fantasy, and they still want that to happen.
They think he's just going to come in and just make everything perfect.
But I'm glad that you said nevertheless, it is a fantasy. It's not something that's just going
realistic
to magically happen.
It's not realistic. But if you can slowly start enacting laws, if you can start getting, I mean, we have, you know, circuit courts that the ACLU came in and said, you know what, you're taking away these people's livelihood of panhandling. And so it got taken to court, and then the local circuit, which is a lot more powerful than just a state, they deemed, you know what, yes, that's their right to panhandle. So unfortunately, like little simple things like that get taken away, where most people in the city are thinking, I either don't want to be bugged by panhandling, or if they're panhandling, can I just go out and do it too? But I mean, the most simple fact is they're sitting on a 2-foot strip in the middle of a busy road, and it's just not safe.
Well, and they passed it, but they don't enforce it.
And then that's the other thing, you know, and that's where the mayor comes in, and you know, and the city council and everything. You gotta enforce these laws, and that's why it goes back to APD when we were kind of a little disagreement with APD. I'm not saying that they're fantastic, but I think a lot of times their hands are tied. I think
that's fair.
I think they're told by the city, you know what, if you see someone smoking fentanyl, that's the least of our worries, just move on. Whereas you and I are like, this guy's smoking fentanyl right in front of us, right in front of kids and stuff, and that's the basic beginnings of just destruction.
Well, the closing thoughts too, it's good. It's very good. The closing thoughts too is there's still hope for Albuquerque. There's still potential for this city. And the hope and the potential rests in the gospel of Jesus Christ. The hope and the potential to not become like Travis Bickle is prayer, meditation, and self-examination. That way the heart doesn't harden and people don't get jaded and bitter and angry. And remember that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. That the vengeance is God's. You know, and so like I think that we have to strive for that, because if we don't, there will be people who will rise up and try to do something about what's taking place here in this city and in cities all over the United States. They're going to rise up and they're going to act in violence, and two wrongs don't make a right. I want to thank you for being on today. It was great to talk to you. Remember that greater things, there's a song that says, greater things are yet to come and greater things are still to be done. And they're to be done in Jesus' name here in the city of Albuquerque. God bless you and thank you.